Hello friends, Val here. So for today's video, it's going to be another generic Honkai Star Rail tier list video. I thought I'd make one myself since 2.0 is coming, and basically every other YouTuber made one. Probably are making one right now, and will continue to do so into the future just to get a load of views. So disclaimer for this kind of tier list, right? All 5 stars will be E0 S0, 4 stars will be E6. Why did I not include signature like on easy? You can basically boil down an LC to something like, be able to somewhat 0 to 3 cycle MOC floors 10 to 12 with far more ease. 12 is a different case where you kind of need far more investments and most likely triple harmony. As for MOC 10, that shit can be 0 cycled with relative ease even without signature Lycone. So number two, this should be focused on endgame content. So this assumes that you are like, meaning a character, or you can reach very unrelatable builds, or even just at bare minimum good investment. Let's say like you have around like a crit value of 70 crit rate and 140 crit damage. Number three, units within certain tiers such as A tier are on a range, meaning like, if I put Kafka, Jingyu 1, and Sealy in A tier, they're not better over the other, but I will explain what makes them good against each other in certain case scenarios. Number four, both MOC and pure fiction assumptions here. But this might be leaning more towards MOC because personally PF is relatively far too easy for me. It's just my opinion, right? So number five, my opinion is correct. You're wrong. Number six, just to make the video short, I will only include 5 stars that I have and played with. Okay. So let's get started. Both the physical trailblazer and the fire trailblazer, yeah, they're gonna be in C tier. Simply put, like as the meta goes on, you know, for in the case of like the fire trailblazer or the tank trailblazer, there are more tanks that keeps coming out. I mean, Fire Trailblazer just can't compete even with like what the current standard banner 5 star tanks, or even the healers such as Bailu or even Japard. Japard especially can like solo sustain and give far much more SP. Bailu has like invigoration and good healing. A good keys that a Fire Trailblazer has against Bailu, I guess, is that Trailblazer can like take in the CC, but CC nowadays they have like very AOE, especially the thick robot girl. So there's that. As for the physical Trailblazer, well, there's far better physical DPSs out there in Clara and then Argenti. Moving on, March 7th, she should be in like B tier. So like in March 7th's case, right? Um, she can act as a sort of like freeze for every like what? Especially if you're gonna go for like like MOC clear with only 4 stars. March 7th is like way too relevant. She has like value in terms of like, guarding the team, being able to like freeze them, assuming that they're like ice weak, right? And right now, it's basically like Jing Liu favored content where basically you can just freeze them over and over again, especially if you have like a good light cone. Assuming you got like what Japard's light cone, but I won't assume that, but like you got good effect hit rate, good defense, marches up to speed. Basically, you freeze them, and then you have to assume that like your DPS is going doing good enough. The next one, Dan Hang. Danang should be at B tier, right? So the reason why I put him at B tier is since I didn't pull for Blade, but I will be pulling for Black Swan, right? Danhang does have some awkwardness in his kit, right? Wherein, let's say you're in a scenario where your ult is full and you want to ult to like, for energy gains. However, your gains more damage when the enemy is slow, and like most of the time there's no enemy that's slow there. So like, oh, well, I guess I have to like, make an awkward ult or like apply or use your skill first in those kinds of scenarios. So he's at B tier. However, his like his strongest is by far E4 for like that juicy advance forward. But sometimes like oftentimes you just ignore the mobs. But if we're talking about pure fiction, it might drag him down to like C tier a little bit. Maybe like low B tier. Let's see. Moving on, Uh, Asta should be at like B tier. I would put her at A tier, but with the release of like the future Harmony units, she kind of loses her purpose, right? In a Jingwon hyper carry or even a Kafka like DOT team, right? Asta kind of lost her purpose because Ruon Mei has provided far better buffs than whatever she could. In like one of those calcs, in one of those calculations, right? In a Kafka team, if you include in a Ruon Mei, I believe it was like around a 40% more damage in a cycle kind of thing. So Asta kind of got power creep, but she's still a good unit. It's more like if you want an upgrade over Asta, you have to pull for Ruon Mei. Moving on, who's this guy again? Oh shit. Moving on, Arlen, C tier. There we go. Herta. So for Herta's case, right? Assuming that this is pure fiction, she should instantly go to S. However, in MOC, you kind of need like a very good Herta, and recently, right? Like the only time Herta is ever good is against the ice weak enemies that can keep spawning. So she's like heavily reliant on content and the amount of enemies, right? Like it's bad to the point that it really needs to summon as compared to Argenti. So as of this moment, right, since this is also consideration of MOC, like a very general tier list, she should be at B tier. Hook, she should be at C tier. I haven't played her as much, but I know her kit just kind of sucks. Natasha, she fell off. Same reasoning as like Fire Trailblazer. They're just far better units. The only edge Natasha has over Bailu is that she can cleanse. But then again, she kind of has like, low healing. She's not SP positive like Luocha and others. So for Sampo, I'm just gonna say it. Characters, the DOT team like Sampo, Serval, what else? What else? Ooh, or the others, Luca and Gwenaifen. The four dots characters as we have now, the 4-star dots. They should be at B tier. Simply put, like they're way too reliant on Kafka. Like with Kafka, they're like B tier, but like without Kafka, they're instantly like even at C tier because it's really difficult to make them work. And sometimes the content, of course, you're never gonna put them against non weak enemies to their elements because the break damage that they provide is kind of insane, especially for Lucas. Because like break effect Luca is like so good, but you're never gonna run Luca. Even a non break effect Luca build, you'd put Luca into a physical weak enemy, never in like other weaknesses. So there's that. Pella is A tier. She's very universal in nature. The hardest content in MOC always has multiple enemies, and she synergizes well with like one of the best teams right now, which is like Jingli Yu, Danang Il. Basically, any AOE DPS or like blast DPS will make use of Pella. The one advantage she has over Silverwolf is that she can have like easier ults, especially with her like what the event light cone. You can build like the wind set on her, or even the Von Whack for easy ults and like energy region. So basically, she just keeps spamming. And the recent PF, right? There's like the ultimate damage. So Bella gains like far far much more energy in like the current pure fiction. So putting her in like A, she's just universally good. The only unit that can apply defense down very fairly easily and just maintaining SP positivity. Moving on, QQ should be an A tier. QQ, and this especially E6, she can honestly go into the Yangqing tier. Wait, why didn't I put Yangqing here? Yangqing, you stay there. The boom. Okay, so like QQ, right? Uh, the problem I have with QQ is that there's like 4 layers of RNG happening in her kit. The one is like wanting to get like the 4 skills, the others that will it crit, and the other is uh the follow up attack. So there's like layers of RNG behind her, that kind of scenario. But she is a self buffing unit, so it makes her far easier to build. The only thing you need is like what crit rate and crit damage. So for Kyuki's benefit, she's good and she's especially gonna get better with Sparkle. Moving on, Sushang. Ooh, I'll say Sushang is at B tier precisely because of E6 assumption and she can fulfill a similar role to like Luca. Sushang, I believe, breaks far faster, especially with like Ruan Mei. So there's that. Ting Yun should be at like, you know what, S tier. So Ting Yun is like one of the most universal harmony units. Every unit is gonna make use of her, except probably Blade, but even Blade appreciates like, you know, the energy region. She enables a lot of team comps on her own, like especially the ones that are very especially DPSs that really want that one turn ult, like Jing Yuan, Argenti, or like faster ults like Damnang Il. They really want Ting Yun, and she provides one of the good buffs ever there. She even especially like E6, she provides uh even more buffs. And in the Jingyuan calculations, right, in the hyper carry comp, her benediction damage contributes like to an overall 15% damage. So don't sleep on her. She's like one of the she's like a secret 5-star unit. Okay. Moving on, Himeko. Uh I want to put Himeko at like A tier, but the mommy should be like B tier. The reasoning for this is that one of the reasons why I want to put her at A tier is because Topaz exists, so you kind of have the hunt and erudition kind of thing going on. So there's that, and she has follow up attacks, and you can easily break enemies, assuming that they are fire weak. The problem is that if they're not breaking, like you know, enemies, and if they're not fire weak, her damage alongside Topaz is just gonna fall off. So yeah, she's there in B tier, but in pure fiction, she's definitely at S tier. So yeah, in MOC, it's like very dependent on like the stages. I mean, every other DPS will depend on the stages. It's just that her kit is locked behind like you know weak fire weakness and stuff like that. So moving on, Welt Welt should also be at B tier. He's like one of the hardest units to build because you really want you know three things like effect, hit rate, speed, attack, crit rate, crit damage. Assuming you want DPS Welt. So like Walt is kind of an awkward position, but he kind of rise. You can say he rise with in A tier with the inclusion of like Ruan May, because you know Walt can act as a sustain. But the problem still is that you know Welt is way too RNG, or rather the MOC content does not have only one enemy, right? It always has two. Sometimes there's like 2 to 5 more, so there's like it reduces Welt's hits or like his skill to hit like it bounces to like multiple enemies, so it kind of affects that. And sometimes his like even though it's multiple hits, if it's like there's 5 enemies and if it does hit the boss, there's a chance that it wouldn't even apply the world's like debuff. So yeah, world and like B tier. So moving on, Bronya is S tier, enough said. Clara in A tier. Clara is the kind of unit where if you're free to play, right, if you just build her right, you're never gonna zero cycle with her because it's dependent on the amount of enemies and like you know, pew pew pew. You have to spam them. Sometimes she doesn't work with Ruan Mei precisely because you know you break them faster. Maybe you could say that with Ruan Mei, you don't mind if they break because they're just gonna die, but you know you ain't gonna see that with an E0 S0 Clara. So with Clara, right? She's at A tier, but like what makes her so good is like you know you are sure to clear that MOC no matter what. Like let's say like less than 5 cycles at best or bare minimum, as long as they're physical weak and the enemies keep attacking. Or better yet, if there's like two bosses, right, and the bosses have like what you call this, like pretty much AOE attacks, and they keep targeting Clara. Yes, she's just gonna pop off, and she can get her ults fast. So a good side for Clara. Moving on, Japard. Japard should be at A tier. Uh, I tried Japard with her. I tried Japard with his like signature Lycon. It's like a massive improvement to the point that I still wouldn't put him at S tier even with a signature Lycon because there are some issues right now in MOC wherein he faces issues when there are multiple CCFX happening at once, like the Aromaton girl just spamming it, and then there's alongside like the other boss that can trigger the CC, and it can target your other teammates, right? Sure, he's good in the sense that he can remove that CC. Basically, he can be like a Fush one wherein he tanks the CC for your teammates, but that is limited to RNG. So Japard should be at like A tier as a tank. Moving on, Bailu. Ooh, I put Bailu at B tier personally. Because for Bailu, right, like I have her level 20, but I've been seeing a lot of showcases wherein she's being used a lot. Sure, there are like she does the job well. It's just that in a very CC heavy meta, she can kind of fall off to like what even lower than Natasha. But like I'll just explain like which is more likely to happen. To make your MOC fail run when one of your teammates die or if one of your teammates gets CC'd. When it comes to Bailu, sure you're getting CC, but you're still alive and you're going to most likely clear that MOC cycle no matter what. So I have to put her at B tier precisely because of that. And she's I wouldn't even include a sustain in like pure fiction because pure fiction there's no like requirements there. So sustain should not be included in like pure fiction. I stand by that. The only sustains that really matters like if they can deal damaging ults and provide support buffs. But why not just triple harmony it? So moving on, Seeley, A tier. People keep arguing she's like top 3 DPS, which she is. Seeley can still like resurgence. I've seen a lot of people been doom posting about Seeley, especially with the resurgence of like what 2 4-star quantum units, and then people doom post like, hey, I haven't pulled for Seeley, which gives me the right to like mock her because I didn't pull for her and I'm clearing MOC with QQ and others. But like, let's just say this: Seeley is just the far more consistent character. And I would say that QQ is the far more RNG oriented heavy character. That's it. I guess you can have more fun with like QQ, whereas for Sela, you can get annoying if she crits or does not crit. And this is an end game kind of tier list. That's why like Sela is like at the top like A tier precisely because she's just that good. Jing Yuan. So if you guys haven't been a fan of my channel or haven't subscribed yet, I'm not really that necessary of a Jingyu Wan main. I just like making characters work except for Yangqing. I know I can make Yangqing work, but it's like that's far too many investments. So for Jingyu Wan, he should be at A tier. Why? A lot of his flaws as a character does not exist no longer in like Endgame. And I'll say this, like I'm gonna make like maybe a Jingyu guide later in the future videos like once like Sparkle comes out because this once Sparkle comes out, Jingwon should like Jingwon and alongside every other DPS, right, would be at the S tier bare minimum because now they have a functional Bronya. I'll just say that, right? So Jingwon's issues like CC, crowd control, what are the others? Lightning Lord. You can't clear the mobs with skill and ult. The thing is, they no longer are meant to appear in the end game because Jingo just clears them, right? And I have an E0 S0. You can watch my showcase in my previous videos where I did a free to play Jingo 1 running, right? A what you may call this? The breakfast S5 LC, right? And one of breakfast Lycone needs to kill an enemy with a 24% attack, right? I believe I didn't gain a single buff from that Lycone at all because uh the MOC buff of that specific time had to kill the enemies through their physical damage. So I was able to cycle it with like Ruin Main, Jing One, and I'm even running a Luocha, right? So it's not one of Jing One's best in slots because in a hyper carry Jing One team, after like the first cycle or like the first turns, like first rotations, you're still in like SP positivity era, right? Like Tingyun, there's gonna be Fushwan, Wowo. Those are the best teammates for like Jingyuan. You're never gonna separate Jingyuan without Tingyun because Tingyun provides that instant ult in order to clear the mobs in like the first wave, right? So a lot of Jingyuan's issues are kind of fixed, especially if you follow the. I would even say like I wouldn't follow the 1 to crit ratio with Jingyuan, but I'd rather say like maybe 1.2 to like 1.8, right? Because Jingyuan, there's a lot of sources for crit damage, especially when Sparkle comes out, right? There's a lot more sources that can come out from crit damage, such as the broken kill and like from the relics of other units. Whereas for crit rate, that shit is kind of like, like the only crit rate that Jingwon has from like relics is the planner set, which is the 8% crit rate. So I had more success with an 80 crit rate, 130 crit damaging you one, more than a 70 and like what 150 crit value, precisely because Jing 1 has a lot of crit checks, and I'll explain those in my future, supposed updated Jing 1 guide, right? But as of right now, Jing 1 and Sealy are like what on the top there. Sealy has advantage more if, especially if like E0 S1, but like they're roughly just about the same to me. Moving on, Yukong. Yeah, Yukong is at B tier. Like at E6, she's just gonna work with like what at best the only units I can see that she's working in and has more appearance on is like Danang L teams and Jinyu 1 teams. But like she's just so awkward to play around in like speed tune, right? And plus Sparkle is coming out, so like, she's gonna go further down to like C tier, but like, there's that. Silver Wolf, at first I put Silver Wolf at B tier, but with the release of Doctor Ratio, right? I put Silver Wolf at like A tier because she provides the necessary single target buffs meant to work with Doctor Ratio. And she's also Quantum weak, and Doctor Ratio is like what? Imaginary weak. Quantum weak and Imaginary weak is like light and dark. So tendency is that there's gonna be a lot more imaginary or quantum weak enemies. And you can just put in what? Silver Wolf and Doctor Ratio together, and you're always gonna find either of the two weaknesses. Put in a Ruan Mei, and then you're just gonna break enemies very fairly quickly. At bare minimum, you should be like at like the very first cycle, you're gonna one shot low diff the first boss, the first elite. So precisely because of Doctor Ratio, she should be at A tier. And plus for free to play or like low players that are not reaching endgame, she should be like way up high, precisely because it makes it smooth. But in endgame scenario, she can, in endgame scenario, she's kind of A tier precisely because of Doctor Ratio. And like a lot of other teams, right? They don't really much include of Silver Wolf, like in a Sealy team, right? It's just better if Sealy is a mega hyper buff, like hyper carry instead of one with Silver Wolf. Just my opinion, like, Bronya and like Ting Yun or even like Ruan Mei, just to like easily clear enemies. So moving on, Luocha at S tier, SP positive, your teammates will never die. Sure, there's gonna be scenarios wherein they get CC'd if you don't clear the enemies, but like that's more of the issue with your DPS at that point. So Luocha should be at S tier. But personally, if I have Wowo, if you're gonna ask me like would you want to have between Wowo or Luocha, I prefer to have Wowo precisely because Wowo provides more buffs and I'm more of an manual player, so I won't have much issues with Wowo. However, if they're ever gonna make like let's say a Harmony Danang Il version where they like spend 3 SP just to buff that one unit, okay, Luocha might be will remain relevant and stay on the top. Moving on, Blade. Haven't played. Yeah, I haven't played Blade. The next one, Kafka. Same alongside Jingyu one. The benefit that Kafka has is that she's the enabler of like the DOT. It's gonna feel weird playing DOT without her. Like, let's say you don't have Kafka and then you watch other showcases like a DOT team. Yeah, you're gonna see like heaven and earth shattering differences of a dot team with or and without Kafka, right? She's basically the enabler for it. She kind of is the advanced forward of the backloaded nature of DOT teams. She is the lightning DOT, and then with Black Swan's release, right? Uh there's that, and especially since she raises this like multiple DOT units to like B tier, which I should be putting them at C tier without Kafka, right? Just by that nature of being the enabler of those archetypes, Kafka should be at A tier. Some people argue like she's easy to build. I'm like, nah, that's cap, because like One, if you're building Dotka, you're also gonna build like what the three the three like the other DOT units, and let's be real here. You're just I'm just gonna build like what other units. And number two, like people keep yapping about like, oh, all you have to search is like attack and speed, but like people have like a mental orgasm when all of their substats roll into speed, and speed is like the most unlikely to appear in like the substat roll. So there's that to consider. I find more success building crit rate and crit damage more than like what's attack like attack and speed and effect hit rate for Kafka. All right. Moving on, links just should be above like. Oh wait, if this E6 links, yeah, E6. Oh, okay. She's like A tier because she can basically cleanse. She can work well with Blade, assuming that Blade does not have Bronya yet, because I believe that Blade, Bronya, and you know what was this? Blade, Bronya, and like Blade, Bronya, and Lynx do not work well together, but I can't search much. But for other teams, right, she's just better than Natasha. She has like what an ult that cleanses. She has Cleanser Kit. She can give the destruction unit more, uh, you know, targeted attack. So overall, she's just a better Natasha. Sure, she has lower healing, but like really at that point, if your DPS is not doing enough, if you know your DPS is not doing enough damage, well, that's more of your DPS's fault, right? Your DPS kind of acts as a sort of tank to support your sustain because one way to sustain is to just kill your enemies, right? So there's that. Push one, yep, she's gonna be like S tier. Push one just basically has CC, you know, CC res for like one time, but you can just fill that up. She basically enables Jing one to be like far more consistent. She gives 10% wide crit rate, and if we're considering like every unit will make use of that 10% crit rate, and like in combination with that with Ting Yun buffing, right? Like if Ting Yun has more chance to crit with her basic attack and her talent, right? She will deal like around 14 to 24k damage. So that's how good like Ting Yun is. That's how good Ting Yun is with Fushwan, right? Uh, that's all I have to say. It's like your team is never gonna die. I guess the longer the fight goes, Fushwan will suffer, but like that's kind of on your part of your DPS also, right? Like, bro, how are you not clearing that, right? So there's that. But like for any crit scaling DPS, they really want Fushwan. So top of S tier. Moving on, Danhang Il. I haven't played Jingliu. S tier. So for anyone who pulled Jingliu, bro, you are you pulled basically the Hoyoverse favorite girl because ever since like 1.4, there's always been like what ice weak enemies, and she's like the best investment because like 50% crit rate, and she has like a lot of like crit value. She works well with like the current two best harmony units, or basically every harmony unit, bar Asta and Yukong. Like she works well with like Bronya. She works well with like uh, what's that again? Ruan May. She's Ice Week. She's like the easiest to play, meaning in terms of ease of use, if you're like a really dumbass of a player, Jing Liu's like, gonna solve it for you. Like, baby, you're gonna somehow find a way to like three cycle even though you make the worst of plays with Jing Liu. So there's that. Moving on, Topaz. Topaz with ratio, okay, she's gonna be at like 8 tier. I don't really believe in the potential. I mean, I've already seen like in this MOC, right, where it's like there's no lightning weak or there's like lightning res enemies. Uh Jing Won and Topaz, they're actually kinda good, you know. She enables a lot of the I wouldn't say she enables, she just amplifies any, sort of team that abuses the shit out of like follow-up attacks. She provides her own personal damage, which a lot of people do not take into consideration when rating her. I guess what people or the masses really like to see from a unit is like, big PP numbers. That's why they go for like what hyper carry styles, but like that kind of ruins the perception of like duo DPS units, or even like units that provide their own personal damage, right? Because there was a time when people didn't believe much in like the Ting Yun like 10k 20k attack, which is like very valuable. So Topaz, especially with like Doctor Ratio, and she should be at like A tier. I'm still not iffy about like Jingwon and Topaz. I've seen some successes, but like it kind of Topaz Jingwon, they kind of expose Jingwon and like flaws even more because of like yeah. So Hanya should be at B tier. Maybe better than Asta. She could potentially be like better than Asta, but not enough to the point that I'd put her into A tier precisely because Ruan May exists, right? And then like you know uh was that Asta is better when it comes to like what DOT. Hanya is better when it comes to like hyper carry. I haven't personally tried on E6 Hanya, but I did have an E1 Hanya and it works so well with like Jing 1 hyper carry comp, right? So there's that to consider. Hanya just got power crept by like what Ruan Mei. She's just far more SP positive. Instead of like 30% damage bonus on like one target, Ruan Mei just provides 72% damage. Ruan Mei provides 25% press spend, far more SP positive. She has Ruan Mei makes enemies like what take more damage from break. Ruan Mei can provide like at bare minimum like 20k to weakness upon like inflicting weakness break on elites. So there's that to consider, which is like far better than what Hanya. So there's that. Moving on, whoa whoa. I want to put her at like S tier, but I haven't played her. Argenti also haven't played him. For Sui Yi, B tier, but I haven't played her because I already have like what built both QQ and Sile, so I don't feel that comfortable putting Sui Yi anywhere. Doctor ratio should be also be at 8 tier, especially like in this current MOC, right? They basically made Doctor ratio have no longer need to run like a debuffer in this current MOC format, and right, because the MOC just gives like 5 debuffs and like advances forward, they haunt units. So, like you can run attack boots with Doctor ratio at that time. So Doctor ratio, he has like good singular target damage, and especially like in the combination with Ruan Mei, you are more likely to break enemies so fast that it's just gonna happen, right? You can basically break two enemies with Ruan Mei and with a Silver Wolf combination because uh you know Doctor ratio can at bare minimum take 2 to 3 actions and then apply the ult, and then the ult also gives like its own like break damage, and then both enemies, assuming that they are imaginary weak, you have Ruan Mei and maybe a Silver Wolf just to support the weakness breaking potential. Just basically, you may not be able to kill both of them, but it makes your run so smooth and so fun to use. I'm glad that we got this character for free. That's why he should be like at A tier. But after trying all of them, this units in A tier out, not really a lot of them are better than one another. Some say that ratio should be like S tier, but that's more so it's because imaginary weak. Like I know people don't post about like both Jingwon and Kafka because they don't have like what lightning. There's no lightning weakness, but like come forward. I had the dream like but like in 2.0, people will regret not having either a Jingyuan or even a Kafka because let's just say I had a dream where 2.0 there's gonna be more emphasis on lightning weak enemies. Moving on, Ruan Mei. Enough said, S tier. She provides weakness break. She's basically the mommy of like giving everything. One could argue that she's better than Bronian because of her pure universality, right? She provides a 25% respite, which on paper 25% pro damage, weakness break to the point wherein she provides her own personal damage. You can do triple harmony with her, assuming that your DPS can break enemies, right? Because she basically enlongs the state in which enemies are broken. So she acts as a sort of sustain, which allows for triple harmony setups, or even like double harmony, double DPS setups to be very much more than be able to easily clear. Let's just say not zero cycle clear, but if you're gonna want to zero cycle clear, you kind of need this too, right? And like maybe the thing yun, but like as of right now, this too, yeah. As of right now, like Ruan Mei, she's like really necessary. It's like the godsend of your account. Moving on. Oh, okay. Well, that's the final of all the characters that I have rated so far. Uh, just to rate, like, both Black Swan and Sparkle. This is my predictions, but Black Swan should be like what, A tier alongside Kafka. Maybe you can argue that if the assumption is like there's lightning, both lightning weak and wind weak enemies. Okay, well they're both gonna go up together. Uh, I'm gonna say like most of the time there's not gonna be a lot of like lightning and wind weak enemies. She's basically the enabler. Kafka's the enabler of like Black Swan. They're both gonna be like A tier as a whole. As for Sparkle, oh yeah, she's gonna go to, you know what? I even say that she's just a better Bronya. Not even like E6 S1 Bronya can compete with how fucking good Sparkle will be, right? So I'm gonna discuss more about how Sparkle works in like my Jing1 rerun, or like if I make a video of just how fucking, like, this is the one unit that I'm glazing to the max level, right? So Sparkle S tier by default. So but anyways, I hope you all enjoyed the video. Leave a like, subscribe, can even share. Uh, Comment down below if you agree or disagree with this video. And with that, thank you.